Hi everybody, and welcome to another tutorial. Today I'm going to discuss the process of applying your own welds to your models. How you go about removing the moulded welds that come with your kit and then replacing them with your own. So I'm going to talk about the materials you're going to need, the tools you may find helpful for this, and then finally I'll talk you through the process of how I actually go about doing this. So let's discuss the tools and materials that I use for doing this. And the first one is Tamiya Epoxy Putty Quick Type, and this is the material that I use for actually replacing the welds. And there's good reason why this is so widely used by modelers. It's just about the right consistency when mixed. It's flexible, it's very sticky, so it holds onto the model very easily. It's just so versatile. You can make all sorts of things. You can do Zimmer it with it, you can make tarpaulins out of it, and you can, replace welds with it like I'm going to use it for here. Next, let's talk about the tools you're going to need. And the first of these is going to be a set of scribing tools. These are going to be used to cut a channel into the model surface. And in the case of German Armour, this will actually remove the plastic weld whilst cutting the channel at the same time. These few individual scribers are by border models, and I think I came across these on AliExpress one day. But the set that I tend to use exclusively for this is the set that I bought on eBay, which comes with various size scribers from 0.2 all the way up to 2mm, and also comes with a handle that you can place the scriber blades into. Now, if you're working on a model that has raised weld detail, really your only option is to cut that detail away. Then you can scribe a channel for the new weld material to sit. And you're going to want to use something like this that has a very sharp chisel blade at one end, which will allow you to cut away material from the surface of your model. This tool by Despe has dual purpose. The blade at the other end is very handy for removing seam lines. Another tool that might be handy is a fine bladed model saw. This could be used to cut a straight line onto the model surface and later use a scriber to enlarge. Now let's take a look at this homemade tool that I use for creating the C-shaped weld patterns. Now credit for this is firmly at the door of Night Shift, I think, and Martin Kovacs came up with this idea, and I think a lot of people use this now. So what we have here is a toothpick, and wrapped around it is the skin of a Coke can. So if you take a pair of scissors to a fizzy drink can and cut the top and the bottom off, cut it so that you're left with a thin sheet of aluminium, you can then cut out a small rectangle, and on one end of that rectangle just taper both ends in. Then you wrap it around a cocktail stick and add a few drops of super glue to hold it in place. Then just take a small modelling file and round off the tip. And I have a few here to choose from that will all fit different diameter welds. So let's take a look at German Armour first, and you can see the weld that I want to work on here. And you can also notice that it's recessed into a channel already. So select a scriber with the required diameter, and with minimal pressure just draw the scriber along the top of the weld. You can see here there's a minimal amount of material that's actually being removed. And you should just continue like that until all the weld has been removed and you just have smooth plastic underneath the scriber. Only when the weld has been removed and you have a nice guide for the scriber do you then apply more pressure to remove more material. And again here, now that the weld is gone, I can really start applying some pressure to remove more material. So let's mix up some epoxy and we can apply this weld bead. So just mix up equal amounts and then roll it out into a bit of a sausage shape that will fit into the channel. And I just use a moistened toothpick which will help press the epoxy into the channel without it sticking to the toothpick. And then we'll take that homemade weld pattern tool and just go along the whole seam of the weld. So keep your spacing fairly tight, but a little bit of irregularity is absolutely fine, and that's what you'd expect to see anyway on a vehicle. So if we take a look at the American-made Sherman, we can instantly see a difference from the German vehicles. That is that the weld beads are all raised up above the plate of the Armour, so running a scriber along the top of this weld, or these weld beads, is out of the question. It's just not going to work. So the only option left to us is to actually cut out those weld beads. And as you can see from this, that takes a hell of a long time to do. Once they are gone though, things become a little bit easier and we can go back to using the scribing tool to try and create channels to put the new weld material into. Now when I try and do these American welds, I try to make them look a lot rougher than the German counterparts. And that's because that's the way they were. If you look at the American welding, it wasn't that much better than Russian welding, and that was pretty atrocious. So a few things I do for that is when I put the epoxy in, I'll try and texture the surface a little bit so that I'm actually imprinting the weld on top of a textured surface. And then on top of that, I'll go over the weld 2 or 3 times, and each time it will progressively look a bit more untidy. So the next type of weld I want to show is a really heavy duty weld, and it's found quite a lot on American tanks. It's where the weld has been built up layer upon layer. So to do this, you want to spread the putty evenly over the surface that has the weld. Then using one of your wide scribing tools, you can imprint the layered pattern onto the weld surface. Now I probably haven't covered everything in this video, but I think that's a pretty good starting point for anybody who wants to try doing this themselves. So I'm going to do the same as I did in the last video and show a few extra welds that I did on the turret, and I'm going to run it in real time and without any cuts whilst I'm actually applying the weld, so you can actually kind of see in real time how I do this. So I hope all this has been helpful to some of you guys, and until the next tutorial, good luck with all your modelling projects.